Hey guys, so Lord here, back again with another review, and today we'll be taking a look at the Horsemen Studios Figura Obscura Headless Horsemen. Now before we get into it here, let's first take a look-see at both the front and the back of the packaging. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we get into the meat and taters of this review that you've all been waiting oh so patiently to see, the Headless Horseman does come with a pair of Kung Fu grip hands with the appropriate hinge, might I add. So that, in and of itself, is really cool. Can't say we've gotten that too many times from the fine folks over at Four Horsemen. On top of that, though, he does come with an alternate open hand for the left side to mirror the one he comes packaged with on his right side. And the coolest alt hand of them all comes with an open palm hand with a ball peg sticking out of it, so you can put one of the two pumpkin heads on there and have him holding his pumpkin head, which is really cool. I never actually thought of that when I bought this figure, so that is awesome. Speaking of that other pumpkin head, here it is. As you can see, it is just burning up. But if you're not into that, you can actually pop the flame off the back and just have some flaming eyes, which is going to be a little helpful given how loose the hands are in the sockets for this figure, and we'll talk about that a little later. But plugging that back in, because if you are going to have this guy displayed holding his pumpkin head, you're going to need something to put in that neck post area. The Four Horsemen got you covered. They gave you a little ham bone steak, which is pretty hilarious and cool at the same time. You can see there's blood and guts and spinal cord goodness up in there. It's just a simple peg. You plug it right in, and it will stay in there. It's not a tight fit, but it doesn't fall out either. And then last, but certainly not least for the Horseman himself anyways, he does come with his trusty sword. We've seen the sword a million times, probably going to see it a million more. It's fine, but I would have preferred the sword with the scabbard myself. Not to say I won't give him one of those. And then for his trusty steed, the mighty black stallion back there, he does come with an alternate main piece that's all flared out and crazy looking. Probably to go with this pumpkin head that's all flared out and crazy looking with the flames. It's burning up, man. I burnt myself touching that a couple of times. Anywho, before we take a closer look at these two, I will move them out of the way for just a moment so we can take some time to appreciate the awesome artwork by the man, the myth, the legend, Nate Barsh on this Dio piece, which is actually the front of the box. It's got some magnetic flaps here and here, so it just kind of wraps around the box. But if we are to flip this around, you get a really cool picture of the Headless Horseman himself, as well as some other landscapes there in the background. So really cool. And this thing is actually quite large, so you could use this to cover a shelf if you really wanted to. But just to entail that this does not fall down, I will actually clip it into place here. Aha! The review set's actually doing me a solid for once. Now, before we talk about the man of the hour, let's talk about Black Aethon quick, because if you've gotten any of the horses from the Mythic Legions line, you know exactly what you're getting here. I'm not going to dwell on this too much. In fact, my horses are actually all on display, so we won't even be doing any comparisons between this horse and the other horses I have. But if you're at all familiar with Aethon and or Phobos, you know exactly what you're getting here. It's essentially just a repaint, which is fine. Honestly, I would have preferred the Phobos legs because the Headless Horseman's stallion is usually depicted as very agile, and these come off as rather bulky and, you know, not agile, for lack of a better term. But it's fine. It works. It gets the job done. I will say, I do like the head sculpt, though. Those red eyes are very piercing, very intimidating, very scary looking, which makes sense for the spooky season, after all. But yes, this is essentially just a black Aethon. All the articulation's the same. The only difference is he's got the Balius saddle, bridle, and stirrups here, and reins. And then he also has the Balius mane pieces here, which you can interchange with the Aethon mane, which is the flared out, crazy looking one. So that is black Aethon. So moving him out of the way, and moving the man of the hour, good old Headless Horseman, in the way. I gotta tell you, when I first got the email that they were potentially going to be doing a Headless Horseman figure, I flipped my crap. I busted a nut and I blew my load, because that is amazing. Because if anyone's going to make a really solid Headless Horseman figure, it's going to be 4 Horsemen Studios. I like the old McFarlane one, I really do, but this one, it kicks the crap out of it, because not only is it articulated and it won't shatter to pieces when you try to pose it, it comes with a lot of stuff, and while some of that stuff is a bit cumbersome to work with, this guy right here is more than likely going to be my #1 favorite figure of 2022. Not going to lie, this guy's got a lot going for him. That said, I will say, I do really like this cape. Shout out to C. Jessamine Company for doing a killer job on this cape, as always. The quality is bar none some of the best I've ever had. You can't pose the cape for crap. And there's a reason for that. It's mostly because of the weight. Because the Headless Horseman is depicted with his cape blowing in the wind behind him. But there is no way in heck that you're going to be able to do that, because it is lacking at least 2 to 3 more wires to help support the weight. If it had those 2 to 3 more wires, this thing would be able to pose like crazy, and you'd be able to get a little bit more dynamism out of it. That said, you could always rig something up. He does have the back adapter ports, maybe the Alithia skeleton arms, because they are black. You could hide them easily under this cape. Have them holding it up, so it looks like it's blowing back in the wind. But I will tell you, I had a dickens of a time trying to pose this for the URL, because it would not stay up. So that is my first complaint. The second complaint lies in the hands, and we'll talk about that when we get into articulation, which we'll talk about right now. So, of course, his head is on a ball joint. Standard Mythic Legions articulation here. This guy is mostly Valak from the neck down. So if you watch my Valak review from a couple of weeks ago, you know exactly what you're getting here. But his head can tilt up and down, can tilt side to side, and look side to side. Lots of range, considering it's a big ball shape. That said, I pull this off, which I will tell you, the standard pumpkin head is the easier of the two heads to rip off this figure. You rip off the neck here. See that port there. And we can take this ham bone steak piece and plug it in like so. Gotta line it up just right, but once you do, it does stay in there quite nicely. And there you go. There is the Headless Horseman without his head. He's got a nice metal clasp, metal chain on his cape as well. I will say this could have been maybe a link or two shorter, so it cinched up around his collar a little better. And I'm going to recommend you guys pop the collar off before you try and put this on, just so you don't wreck the cape. It may be big enough to go around the collar here, but just to stay on the safe side, hashtag don't break your toys, I would say pop it off. That said, his shoulders can go out to the side, back down, forward and back. He's got a single joint at the elbow with rotation, swivel at the glove, swivel at the wrist with a hinge, which are easy enough to pull out. That's what she said. There you go. And if we were to take the pumpkin head we just removed and the ball joint hand that we took a look at earlier. Pop this on like so. Again, you probably want to heat some of these up before you go doing that, but this one is a little less tight than the flaming pumpkin, which honestly I would rather use, but for time's sake we'll just do this. And then all you do is plug this back in. Okay, it's making me look like a fool right now. It was tight for a second. Probably because this is the non-flaming head. It wants to sit a little better, but once you pose it like this, it just droops like that. And that really sucks. Because not only is that hand loose, I pop out the grip hand on the other side, which has the in and out hinge, and swap it for one of the hands with the up and down hinge. This too is also really loose with nothing in there. And I mean, we're talking first Mythic Legions Kickstarter loose. The very first Legions the Horsemen did start to have hands that are this loose. I've had a couple that were like this. Even homeboy, mascot of the channel, Brother Mandibulous's hands aren't this loose. So I'm going to have to contact For Horsemen about that. I haven't seen anyone else's review of this guy other than my good buddy T-Biz's. I believe his hands were a little loose as well, but I don't know if they were as loose as mine or not. He doesn't tend to go deep into those things like I do. Nothing wrong with that though. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do a little research, find out if that's a common problem or just a problem with mine, because the hands it comes packaged with are okay, but the alternate hands, they're all loose on mine, and that really sucks because Valak does not have loose hands. His hands are quite tight, in fact, but it is what it is. Nothing I can't solve with a quick email. That said, he does have a ball joint in the torso. I can crunch forward and back, tilt side to side, rotate side to side. He does have a little loop-de-loop in the belt for his sword, which is really nice because I didn't notice this when I was doing the reviews for the Alithia Wave. There is a little loop specifically for swords there. So you can store it like that, and it's nice and secure. It's not flopping around. It's not going to fall out on you. But again, I would prefer the sword with the scabbard. So maybe, just maybe, I will switch his sword out with the Dark Templars at some point, because he does come with the scabbard. That said, his hips can kick out to the side, back down, forward and back. He's got a thigh cut. He's got a single knee. That is a little bit tighter than Valak or Lord Bardrick, so they have tightened it up a little bit. He's got a swivel beneath the knee, and then he has a swivel at the foot with a hinge and a rocker joint. So, with that being said, he also has peg holes at the bottom of the feet for the display stand he does not come with, but I'm going to be sticking him on the horse anyways. What do you need a stand for this guy for? I will say, though, he is a little tricky to stand sometimes. He has a tendency to lean forward. That's not okay. But at any rate, I still love this figure, despite its minor shortcomings. I'm sure most of you guys won't be bothered by that type of stuff. I know I'm anal and OCD about everything, but when you make significantly less money than the rest of the community, you tend to be that way because you don't have as much money to spend. And when you do spend it, you want your money's worth. So, with that being said, getting Black Aethon back in here for the final shot here. I really like this set. I would recommend anyone who's a hardcore fan of Sleepy Hollow to pick this up, because Sleepy Hollow is one of my favorite American folklore stories of all time. I think it's one of the best pieces of American literature of all time, and it's an overall really fun story for the spooky season, and this figure embodies it in spades. This figure is awesome. Yes, it has its issues, but for the price point, I don't think you'll be disappointed. So with that being said, let's now move on and take a look at some size comparisons. First up, here's our Headless Horseman alongside the only other figure we've gotten from this Figura Obscura line from the fine folks over at Four Horsemen Studios. Good old Krampus, who I took a look at for last Christmas season. Check that out if you haven't already. Would really appreciate it if you did. As well as a figure that he shares most of his pieces with, Valak from the Mythic Legion's Illithia wave, who I took a look at earlier this month. You already know what to do if you haven't done it already. But obviously, like many a Four Horsemen Studios figure, nowadays at least, I can't really speak of the old ones because I don't have any of those. The Headless Horseman scales quite nicely with anything they have done because of the parts reuse. And while I'm not the biggest fan of reuse, when it's done well, I actually approve of it. And this is one of those times. And last, but certainly not least, we have our two regulars, the Mythic Legion's Brother Mandibulus, love its spawn, who as usual, towers over everyone. Now, if the Headless Horseman was atop his mighty steed, maybe not, but as it stands, he is no match for good old Al Simmons here. So with that being said, time to wrap things up, some final thoughts. Overall, and while this figure may not be 100% perfect, I mean, let's face it, it is mine after all, I'd still be hard-pressed to say that this is not my #1 favorite action figure of 2022, because when all is said and done, you finally get good old Headless Horseman set up atop his mighty steed. It is quite the sight to behold. This thing looks freaking awesome and super cool when you finally get everything set up. It's a bit fidgety. The road to get there is quite cumbersome due to some of the issues I do have with this figure, but at the end of the day, this is a really solid piece from Four Horsemen Studios, and I feel bad for anyone who wasn't able to obtain him for a reasonable price on the secondary or when he first went up on Store Horsemen. That said, I would highly suggest you pick this guy up sooner rather than later, if you're financially able, that is, because I only see this set going up in price. Now, there is the potential for a retailer exclusive, much like the Krampus figure I took a look at last Christmas season, but I'm not 100% sure if the Four Horsemen have plans to do that or not. Most likely they will, but don't quote me on that. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you're so inclined, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know whenever I upload more reviews like this one. And stay tuned, because this coming Monday on All Hallows Eve, I have a review going up for the most satanic figure released in this year, 2022. What's that going to be? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned to find out. But if you haven't already, please hit me up on Instagram at Overlord Productions, as well as the Mythic Legion's Cabal over on Facebook. Be a part of the community, but as always, keep the comments civil, because the world sucks enough as it is, especially when your head's taken out by a cannonball. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.